won't believe this. We're back again here at allpointstv.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program called What's Going On. And I hope in the next hour that you learn something. And if you don't learn something, it's because I'm not teaching it right. The audience is, we have a motto here at the station that the customer is always right. Now, where we learn that from? We learn that from the capitalists who understand that if the customer's not satisfied, they're not going to buy your product. And so we are trying to do the right things here by the customers we have. And our customer base is really growing, by the way. We're getting a lot more people on board, and a lot more of the networks are picking us up. We're going to be doing another version of Tucker Carlson around here if he's not careful, because I consider him to be, let's see, what is he? He's outstanding voices out there in the media right now. And I love the fact that he's fearless in terms of the content that he has. I mean, this man has done some things that has, really, people have not recognized what this man has done. This man has stopped the people on the road to World War III. He may not prevent it single-handedly, but I'll tell you what he did do. He stalled the efforts to lead toward that by going over there and introducing Putin to the American public so they can see for themselves that the leaders of this country are basically lying about this man. So you can that's one contribution that Tucker Carlson can carry along way down the road, because he has actually stopped a lot of things from happening here. Another voice out there is the voice of Colonel McGregor, I think his name is. That is one of the clear voices out there doing the analysis of what's going on in Eastern Europe and so on. And do not believe any of these things these politicians are talking about, because all they do primarily is stand before the American people and further confuse what's going on. We don't get into clarity confuse what's going on in the world. And if you're waiting for clarity from these politicians, you're going to be more confused than ever if that's your sole source of information. Besides Carson, there's also Doore, Doore, I think it spells his name. And his podcast program is very, very important. I didn't recognize how important his voice was until the person kept sending me different feeds of what this man was saying. And then I recognized this man's a major voice out there. He's the voice out there. He's not quite as caustic as Alex Jones, but Jones is like the apex of caustic rhetoric. But I love these fearless people that's out there in the media just trying to be a voice in the wilderness to the American people, that they need to pay more attention to their leaders and what these people are doing in Washington, which I don't think we're doing enough of that anywhere in this country, because we have to pay attention to these politicians who are definitely out of control. Now, before I get started, I want to say this. I called in a posting I did late last night. I had to put it in there twice. I want to tell these officials here in the city of Flint, it's time to get the late Councilman Eric Mays. It's time to get this man funeralized in the city of Flint. And I don't know, I do know, but I don't care what the bottlenecks are and what the particulars are. People trying to act like they are so meticulous about following the law. Let me tell you something, politicians that are holding this up and trying to act like they not deliver this insurance policy to the heirs of this man, and that's holding it up. Let me tell you something. Politicians, you're not a bit more interested in following the law than the man in the moon. And the reason why these politicians run for these offices, because they want to avoid following the law. All of a sudden, they want to be law-abiding, and they have to go by every I being dotted, every T being crossed, in terms of what the claim is that Eric Mays did not leave any instructions for his burial. Well, there's an insurance policy that the city carried out, and somebody's entitled to the money. And if you can't figure out who that would be based upon any particulars written in writing, then let's try the fact that his progenitors would be the inheritors. The estate would pass down with all the bills, of course, to those that would be the inheritors of the estate, and whoever they are, they should be the ones then that are handling this insurance, so we can get this man a decent funeral, which should have happened last week, but didn't, because we had so much turmoil around this man's passing. This man deserves better than that from the city, and you city fathers here. This is a mark on your leadership to make a mockery of this man's passing and transitioning to the next stage. Okay, so that being said, that's not the only indictment I'm going to make today. I want to. I brought some books to the studio, but that's one book I want to bring out in particular. I'll maybe save these other books. There's 2, 4, 6, 7 more books that I brought. Them not probably going to get around to talking about, because I want to spend a lot of time on this book. I think it's more germane to discuss this book written by the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, and that's William Rehnquist. And I think it's appropriate to do that because of the offensive speech this president gave last week, and I'm offended by it more than probably most, because I'm offended by the fact that this man showed, outside of all the other disrespect he showed for the American people. I'm floored by the disrespect this man showed for the framers of this country by his taking to the podium, which they're trying to act like the man was talking in Churchillian terms up there on that podium. That supposed to be the voice in which he spoke. Let me tell you the voice in whom Joe Biden spoke. The voice of Chuck Schumer. Now, you shouldn't even say Charles Schumer, the senator from New York, the one that, if he doesn't get his way, wants to pack the Supreme Court. And this president, very offensively to me, stood there and in front of the judges that showed up, and don't forget, some of them didn't show up. I can tell you that one judge in particular would never show up while he's up there giving the State of the Union address, which I hope was the last one he'll be able to give, because he won't be in the office next year this time. And that is Clarence Thomas, who he tried to railroad out of the office in 1991. During the confirmation hearings that they had to confirm him in the aftermath of the death of Thurgood Marshall. And that was a whole different bandwagon of things going on around that, because he would be taking the place of the hero of the civil rights movement. I'm going to show you a book here that some of you should read, which will help you to get a handle on that.
Okay, now I was going to say too, though, that and that book's title, there's actually a name of it wasn't a president, it was a Supreme Court justice who was impeached, right?
Yeah, this is William Rehnquist was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, but I said one of the names in the subtitle of that book.
That's right. One of them is the judge, federal judge, the historic impeachments of Justice Samuel Chase, and at that time, and up until Clinton, was the only president that had been impeached. We used to always say, when I was going through my grad work, we were always lauding in those classes that. See, I got my degrees back in the 80s and early 90s. From Eastern, having gone through Wayne and gone through all the major universities here in the state of Michigan. Not bragging about that, because I really was in those classes paying money for degrees that I had earned through my reading and through my knowledge. But I'm glad to have the validation of the information. And really what degrees do, quite frankly, is give you a validation of the information you're supposed to have mastered. I can see that Claudine Gay from Harvard University didn't understand that there is a validation of the knowledge that you have by these persons plagiarizing their way to the presidency of what's supposed to be the #1 university in the United States. It might well have been once that, but it's not that now. I don't even know what university I would name that would be in that place now. But anyway, the validation, I have to give William Rehnquist a lot of credit. This book called Grand Inquest, The Historic Impeachments of Justice Samuel Chase and President Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson, up until the 1990s, was the only president this country had ever witnessed being impeached. That's the kind of standing that the president of the United States has. Not that that Johnson was the only, not even that Johnson deserved impeachment, not based on what they impeached him for. And I'll get into that in a minute. But I wanted to, on the preface going to this book by William Rehnquist, I wanted to go into another book because this is why Clarence Thomas was not there last week, and he would never be there as long as Biden is there. I want to see what happens once Biden is gone. Hopefully, he'll be gone in the next election on the 5th of November. Write that down on your calendar. And hopefully he'll be gone in the next election. We got to get this man out of there. This man is so dangerous. But when Joe Biden was the head of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, which means they would be over the confirmation of those that would be nominated to be on the Supreme Court, since the president appoints all of the civil officers of the United States. And some of those civil officers, not all of them, but some of the civil officers will be the federal judges. All of them are appointed by the president, and they're all civil officers of the United States. There are others as well. The ambassadors, civil officers of the United States. The members of the president's cabinet, they are appointed with the approval of the Senate. If they see the president involved, the president is the CEO of the country, says he has his fingers in all of the parts of the federal government as a controlling influence in the separation of powers. And I will tell you this. I stayed with this president that spoke last week, but it's very hard for me to do because I could not hardly stand to stay there and continue to listen to this man, but I felt a responsibility to do so because I'm a public commentator. But it was very difficult for me to do that. And I think the low point, and there were a lot of low points, but the lowest of the low points was this man taking umbrage at the podium on the State of the Union and chastising members of the Supreme Court before the nation and before the world, which showed this man does not have even any respect for the separation of powers in this country.
What's encouraging, I wish I could have sent it. It was on Instagram. There's a guy who was being interviewed, and he's a pivotal figure amongst liberals. Mm-hmm. And he was being interviewed, and he had a T-shirt on, and it said "Liberals for Trump." And the people were asking about why the guy who was a comment, he was talking. He said, "Well, I noticed your shirt," and he said, "You're liberal." He goes, "I'm a liberal," and he said, "I've always been a liberal." But he said the way they pulled out all the stops and all the, all protections just to get this man or try to go after him is very disconcerting. And I can't sit by and idly. He said they're making this making it very personal, and they're disregarding all the laws. And He goes, that was very, I'll search that out, see if I can find that again.
I haven't seen that one, but I tell you what I have seen, John, I've seen many different instances of where the people are fed up and outraged over what they're doing in terms of having crossed this line. Letitia James is a very good case in point. Letitia James, the one that is the Attorney General of New York, I don't think she'll get that again with her embarrassing that state. And New York has a lot of representatives up there embarrassing the state of New York. Charles Schumer is one of them. That's a voice really in which Biden's up there speaking. They're trying to act like he was Churchillian in his talk. He was speaking in the voice of Charles Schumer, Senator Charles Schumer. And the comments he made about the members of the Supreme Court was nothing but Charles Schumer voice. This man who has come out and talked about we're going to make you suffer the whirlwind, Kavanaugh. This man's a public figure as a member of the Senate, longstanding member of the Senate. I need to go back and look at when this man was first elected, but it's time for this man to go. It's time for most of them to go, but Schumer should go first. This man up there talking against members of the Supreme Court. It's one thing for commentators to do that because the commentators are the ones that's outside of the orbit of the government, critiquing the government from what it is doing. But when you have a member of the government taking the members of the Supreme Court to task for rulings that's within their purview to make as the interpreting body of the federal government, and that's not your function, but to make the law, and then you're criticizing those who are to interpret the law, that's not your job. Your job is spelled out, you legislative members. Your job is to carry out your duties vested in your part of the federal structure. And and when I say federal structure, I should say the federal government, because the federal structure is the federal government and the state. So your job in the federal structure, the federal government part of it, is to in fact make the law. Your job is not to come behind the making of the law and then critique those who are the ones who have the responsibility of in fact interpreting the law. And if your interpretation differs from yours, what you should do there is stay in your lane. Because your job is not to do their job. Your job is to do your job. And it's vested in Article 1 of the Constitution of the United States. This Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution of the United States. But this is the kind of overreach we had in Biden's speech. And when Biden stood up there at that podium and was talking about how he disagreed, I mean, this is amazing. I'm sounding like Jesse Peterson. This is amazing that could happen, that a president would be at that podium and use the State of the Union address to take the court that he disagreed with some of the things the court has said, to take them to task before the American people and before the world, to show what? To show that this man doesn't even have any respect for the separation of powers in this country. That's not your job to do that.
I don't remember even a president who was allegedly pro-life going after the justices that made that decision. In any of their speeches, they're dissatisfied with it. And it was, I mean, if you want to look at the way they pushed through Roe v. Wade, it was an activist, that was done, that was planned. It wasn't, it avoided any American, any input from the American people. But I never even heard presidents after the fact going off about that and try to pillar the people who made that decision in their speeches. I never heard that.
Never heard it, John. Yeah. Never heard it, because none of the other presidents had to cover up as much as Biden had to cover up. If you notice that Biden didn't give a State of the Union address, what is he going to say? I was watching, quite frankly, at the very beginning. I didn't want to miss any of the speech, but I was watching at the very beginning. I wanted to see if this man would get up there and say, right in front of our lying eyes, and say to us what you normally would say in a State of the Union address. You would say, ladies and gentlemen, the state of our union is strong. And then everybody's supposed to jump up and cheer, knowing that that's not the case. But he couldn't even say that, because if so far not being the case this time, that who would have believed him?
But maybe I'm not I admit sometimes I don't pay attention, but typically the State of the Union address is given in January, isn't it?
Well, January, no, not January, because that's the inauguration that's the inaugural moment. There's no set time for it. The Constitution just called, and there's no real reason. I mean, I think we should go back to what it was before you had TV and radio so dominant in well, not so much radio now is so dominant, but TV is so dominant right now. You cannot do it in these modern times because number one, the president wants to get the audio and the video. It's a production now, and you see how they lead up to it and have all the commentary afterwards. Have somebody now responding to the president's speech and the rest of it. So it's a fanfare around it. There's no set time. The Constitution does not give a set time for the speech to be given. But it won't be in January because January is the time that you have an inauguration. And then also, not that happens every year, but the fact that you don't want it colliding, and so there's no set date for it. But and then you had it. You might have it in. Let's see, having it last on the. I think it was on the 5th of March. It didn't have to be in March, but the president. Sometimes what they'll do is that they'll set it at a time when the president needs to get up there and stop the bleeding. It's all politics, but they're politicians. That's what this is about. When Wilson gave his, and the rest of the presidents gave theirs going back in time, many of them wrote the speech out, and then it was read in the Congress. But you can't do that now. The people expect the president to go before the public and give the speech like he does the inauguration. You can't give that and don't have it televised either. So these are a chance for the president to go before the public and get whatever brownie points that brings to him by him going public and using the bully pulpit, as they say, of the presidency. But this was very offensive to me to have listened to this president, and when he got up there and said what he said about the members of the Supreme Court right in their faces, and chastised them because he didn't agree with the way they handled Roe v. Wade, and he wants now Biden was giving a campaign speech. He was trying to keep the women in the court because people are running away from this president like this man is Raid, like they are like the bugs run from insects run from Raid, because this man is poisonous and he's losing his base. And so this was a campaign platform for this president. But when he took on, as he did, Charles Schumer's role and criticized these justices, I almost fell off my chair because that had never happened before, and I hope it never happens again. The critique of the members of the Supreme Court shouldn't come from the members of the government, because they're not staying in their, as you say, they're not staying in their lane. Each of them have an assigned lane. Can we get to that point? In the separation of powers, there is a determination on the part of the framers in the separation of powers to distinctly clarify what the role is of each of the three parts of the federal government. And the legislative branch is vested in the legislative branch is vested in the Congress of the United States, clearly stated in Article 1, Section 1. And in Article 2, it clearly states that the vested interest of the executive branch is in the president of the United States. It says that in writing. So you can't say then you're going to come over here as they think they can do and start doing the president's job. You can't do that. And you cannot tell the president, you vipers, in that den of vipers, you can't tell the president how to do his job in that office. Now, if he doesn't do it based upon the particulars of the office, and he exceeds the authority that's vested in the president as the person that carries out and makes sure that the laws that are passed by Congress, you pass the laws, and the president's job is to make sure the laws are faithfully executed. That's his job. Or when we have a woman president, that'll be her job. Now, obviously, in Article 3 of the Constitution, then with those two processes assigned to the legislative branch and to the executive branch, then obviously then the third branch of government, federal government, would be the judiciary, and their job is to interpret the law. The president should not get into that part and that role and make any comment about how that role is carried out. The reason is because there's a binding, we don't understand this, but there's a binding of those persons in the roles in which they have been assigned. There is even, you scholars listen to this. I'm teaching the scholars something here now. They're not going to say anything. There's a hedge around, the Constitution places a hedge around the three branches of government. There's a hedge around them. And around the president, that hedge remains unless it is removed. See, that's why I'm waiting for the Supreme Court on this part. I'm waiting to see what the Supreme Court's going to say on this immunity issue. I'm waiting to see that. I got to see what they say about that. I know what they should say. I know what the court should rule on the immunity issue, because the framers did not go there. But the framers did, in fact, give a protection against anyone running roughshod out of their lane into other lanes they don't belong in. And what they did here brilliantly, if it's recognized for what it was, what they did brilliantly, because they had a task to do here. One is make sure that everybody was staying in their lane, but at the same time, making sure that if anyone did that which they were not assigned to do because it's not the role they should play, the framers made sure there was a way to hold them into account. Now, to hold who into account? To hold the president, the vice president, and all civil officers of the United States into account. Now, there was nothing in the Constitution that was to hold the members of the House and the Senate into account, because that would be the role of the House and Senate. It is not in the Constitution, because what they were to do was, in fact, in designating the powers, delegating the powers, what they were to do then was to assign to themselves how their accountability would be carried out. And they did that in Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2. Go read that and then see where the House was given the authority, was given itself the authority to then chastise its own members. Didn't assign that to the impeachment process, but to use the authority of the states, the ultimate authorities, based upon how the Constitution was arranged. You see, we don't understand that either. The states were to be the ultimate authorities. That's why you have them talking up until 1861 with interposition and nullification. The states are saying they can nudge themselves in between decisions of the Supreme Court as it affects those that were in the states, which was the jurisdiction of the states. There was supposed to be a barrier between the federal government and the citizens of the states, and that barrier was the states itself. Do y'all agree with that? So I wanted to use it as the basis of my talk today. The impeachment. This book is, in fact, I think this book needs to be read. I think this book should be read in all grad, in all of the persons that are getting these graduate degrees in since they're getting them in law. They're not getting in the Constitution, they're getting in law. All the grad. Here's a recommendation I would make. This is George Moss speaking now, so I'm not speaking as a voice in any of the universities. There's no voice in the university that can top my voice, but I don't speak from that perch anymore. This book, Grand Inquest, I would say that every graduate school, and I've looked through a lot of different books, and when you go in, one thing about graduate school, I would give them credit for, it's a lot of reading involved in it. A lot of reading I had done before I got there, but there's a lot of reading that's required, and a lot of case. That's what they've done. They've done a lot of case reading. They spent their time really with case reading. That's their training. They're trained in the case studies. That's why they're always talking about the Supreme Court said this. The Supreme. You know something. I don't spend a lot of time talking about these court cases. I know the court cases, but I don't spend a lot of time with it because I know the ultimate voice is not the Supreme Court. The ultimate voice in this country is supposed to be the Constitution of the United States, and that gets us back to the framers. Okay, so let me try to tie some of these loose ends here together. I know why Clarence Thomas was not there at that State of the Union address. He hasn't been in any of them as of late. This is the third one that Biden has given, three that Clarence Thomas has been absent from. Now, he's been president some, but he hasn't been president in the ones that Biden has been over. It's because he's still angered by the fact that he was taken through the ringer with this. I was making these allegations that Republicans are sex maniacs. And Trump was so, can I use the word? I don't want to use the word on TV, but the H word, I'm talking about within the realm of sex here, that he raped a woman, assaulted a woman in a dressing room in a department store. And all these years passed, and nothing was filed, no claim was made legally against it, and the time had passed in which it was actionable because the statute of limitations had passed. What the court did, listen carefully, you lawyers for Donald Trump, because I've been surprised by some of the things that have happened as far as what you're doing, although I know you're doing a good job under the circumstances, because the weight of the law, given the interpretation of these liberal judges, has been weighted against you because you're not getting a fair hearing in these courts, certainly by the court, by Arthur Engoron. This man has no business being on the court. I'm not here to tell any stories out of season here, but I'll tell you this man does not belong in any court, in any courtroom in this country. This man has disgraced the court.
He has the guy who ruled against Trump in that one case.
Yeah.
I saw a picture. I pulled it up, and they made a fun about Robert Bork, when they were trying to get him the Supreme Court justice, because of the pointy little beard. This guy just looks like I can't say because you don't like to swear on your show, but your podcast. But he looks like a real feces eater. That's what I mean. It's just he doesn't look like he just looks like a imp. He looks like somebody who his sneering comment.
Yeah, John, the man is This is a wacko on the court. You can't imagine how bad this man was.
We got one locally. It's very parallel, though. That one guy we both know in our local court system. I mean, he should not be in court off of the court either. But I can't say the guy's name.
Yeah,
but everybody knows what I'm talking about.
From yeah, I know you're talking about. John, this guy is now nationally being celebrated. Arthur Ingram is a travesty what happened in that court. Number one, New York is like that though. I'm not interested in going to visit anything in New York.
I would pay good money, never have to have my feet go into that city. I mean,
if I have to, when I leave the country, probably in May, I hope not to even go through the state. Although many of the flights do, you can go through Washington and exit out of the country as well, and that might be the way in which I will go this time out of the country. But I'm going to try not to touch that state.
And then they have to call it the National Guard in the city, or is working. I think the NYPD and National Guard now because things have gone so bad. But you don't hear much about it in the press.
That's right, but that's what John. That's what it is right now. It is that state is so out of control, and you can see why it'd be out of control with people like Arthur Ingram. Letitia James, people like Letitia James are there. This guy over there, that's the attorney over prosecuting attorney in the Manhattan borough, Aaron Bragg. With people like that, they've stopped prosecuting crime. They got all their attention on prosecuting Donald Trump. And Arthur Ingram, this man, how this man could rule that. I'm talking. I wonder if people are aware of the fact that Trump was charged in overpricing his property to get a better deal in terms of the loans that his company was getting, so that he could, in fact, expand his business and things of that sort, which is, in fact, is a benefit to the state. Have you ever heard of the state before, any state, arguing that it does not want to have an ascending amount of money in the ascendancy where the property value is increased? Have you ever heard of a state ever decrying that? Of course not.
I think I brought this up before, though. Okay, if you're going to a bank and you're claiming assets in a house, if you want to get a house for as collateral, you say you're using a home or whatever as collateral building, wouldn't they send out an independent person to evaluate the property and make an assessment?
Of course.
So they're negligent in their own duties because they don't have this person in place. Because you definitely, I mean, when you're buying a house, you have an assessor go through it for yourself to see.
I'll tell you this: to loan that amount of money that these builders, investors are asking for. Not that they don't have the money. What they're doing is borrowing the money, because the smart thing to do is use somebody else's money, not your money. You want to use other person's money, but you don't want to pay any additional penalties for it. That's why you pay it back within the time period in which the loan is in fact made. I mean, persons are aware that in this court case in which Ingram was ruling against Trump, saying he had inflated the value of his property, the people that loaned Donald Trump the money, the bankers, went there and testified for Trump and said that if he wanted to borrow some more money, based on the track record the man had with them on the other loan that they were criticizing him for, they were saying they would loan money to him again. This is a testimony in the court. Has anybody have they said that about that in the press? Of course not, because that would exonerate Trump of any wrongdoing. They actually punished this man for a crime that didn't have any victims to it. Now we got a problem with who do you pay the money to? There are no victims.
I see, and that's another thing is too. I mean,
John, were you aware that the bankers went there and testified?
Yeah, you mentioned it, and somebody else mentioned it. I was talking to, and they said, yeah, but they already had the bankers that he borrowed the money from come into the courtroom and say he didn't. He paid it back.
Yeah,
and he paid it back with an interest and an appropriate time. Of course, they don't want you to pay it off fast enough, too fast,
Right.
then they don't have a accrue more. Because you do that with a credit card company, you pay off your debt before each month when you get the bill. They refer to you they call you a deadbeat because they can't get interest off of you. 29, 30%, 23%,
Right.
even if it's 8 or 10%. It's any points above what you actually borrowed is definitely an impairment for you. Definitely.
They don't want you paying it back early, because they don't make any money on it they make money on the loan, because if you make a loan, you walk out the door, there's an interest on it before you get back, turn your back around and go back and tell them that you want to pay it at that time. I've made that mistake in the past, but I don't make it now. I use everybody's money, and I don't pay any interest on it because I pay it within the time period in which there's a grace period in the loan. If you pay it off within 25 days and the bill comes every 30 days and you pay it off within that 25-day window that you have, then you can use that money, which I use to expand my income, but I don't want to pay any money for it. And that means I don't pay any late fees, and I don't pay any fees that would charge me for the use of their money. I use that money without paying anything for it. So I expand my limited income, make my income grow, and not pay a penalty for it. Now you try to do that you try to do what they're doing, and see how it comes out. The bankruptcy of the country has come from because they don't understand how you make loans. You don't have 34 trillion. Father, forgive me for that thought. I'm giving you some words here. You don't let $34 trillion sit there in perpetuity. These people are crazy. You don't sit there and let 34 trillion. We're not talking about Trump's money. This is not Trump's money here. Trump he started out with about $3 billion. He'll have that when he leaves office, because Donald Trump knows how to make money. And this thing he's doing right now is going to make a lot of money, where he is selling some shoes, and they're going to be worth a lot of money in the future, because they're going to be not only style pieces but historic pieces, and they'll grow in value over time. But because of the value of Donald Trump to the country, and because of his standing resolutely against his persecutors — these are not prosecutors, these are persecutors — against his persecutors, his income stream is unlimited into the future. Because when these guys are dead and gone, Ingram, when he is dead, when he's made that transition, nobody's going to remember this man, other than the fact he'd be tied into what he did in this Trump trial. Had you heard of him before this? I certainly had not heard of him, but I'm paying attention to him now. And I think we ought to throw this man out of office like yesterday, through the right protocol. I'm not saying go up there and grab Max lapel and throw him out. I'm saying we ought to go through the process, through the impeachment process, that if he's not I didn't check this, I think he's Supreme Court, state of New York. So that means then that he would fall under the umbrella of the state impeachment process. They should impeach this man, which would be to make an accusation against him of going beyond the excessively going beyond the duties of his office, and impeach this man, and then try this man in the state Senate of New York, and then throw this man out of office. This man does not belong in a courtroom over anybody.
Now you brought this up. I mean, of course, from my understanding, now this was like years ago, so I might have this wrong. You could correct it because you're more eligible than I am. But every state constitution in the United States has to have elements of the U.S. Supreme, the federal Constitution, because to become admitted into statehood
that's true. And see what happens also in that is that the federal government was also paying attention when the framers were writing the document. They were paying attention. It was already in place by some of the states that it put in their particulars. Don't forget, the states here created the federal government. And so the framers were looking back at some of you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You go back and look at some of the things already in place, and you build upon that. So all state constitutions have an impeachment procedure in it. It should be used with more regularity, particularly now. And I'll tell you why. We have more politicians now out of control than ever before in this nation's history. Almost all the politicians are out of control.
Well, you see, I think it's the
in this
Democrats.
country right now.
Typically, the Democrats just sneer at the process. They don't follow it because they know that when it's brought to bear against them, they avoid it. Whereas any minor infraction the Republicans might engage in, they want to impeach or imprison at a drop of a hat. It's like two steps of double. And I've always noticed that about liberals. They'll go around, get smug, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, see, we can do this because of this." And then somebody else down the road who is not one of them tries to use the same justification. They wanted to attack. There's a difference. Well, no, there's not. Oh no, there is a difference. And they get so heated about it.
Yeah.
It's like, you guys are okay. Nobody should violate the rules. You might not like them, but you try to live by them. But the Democrats just have this attitude like, I can get away with it because it only applies to you, not to me.
That's right. And John, they don't intend to follow the Constitution and follow the voters or the anything when it comes down to power. They're not intending to. They keep talking about Trump won't step down. Trump has already stepped down from power, and what the man did to make sure they had no question about whether stepping down, he left the White House 30 minutes early, so they could not say he stayed in there a minute after 12 o'clock. And the president was up there giving his inaugural speech, and he was still in there as the president. The man was usurping Biden's role. No, he left 30 minutes early to avoid that accusation. And for them to be saying now that they're afraid that he won't leave if he gets back in there is very bothersome. If you understand that much of this is nothing other than projection by these politicians who are basically talking about themselves. Don't forget those three fingers that come back underneath that thumb when you're out there pointing at somebody, and what those three fingers are doing. Because this is not really about Donald Trump at all. It's about Joe Biden and those who are his financiers and his managers and his controllers.
It also goes even deeper than that. It goes to general contempt for the American people. It really does.
Yes.
Because a general sneering attitude of the
Sure
left.
it is.
It's like, oh, how dare you question us?
Yeah.
We're superior to you. Your brains are so limited compared to ours, you know?
Yeah, they're so dangerous because they don't have respect for the American people. There's no sovereignty. If you don't have, I wrote about this today a little bit in my post, that if you don't have if you don't have respect for the sovereignty of the country, and they don't, because look at the invasions taking place, and they're not trying to stop that. They're encouraging it. If there's no sovereignty in the country, and we'll see it's not, because they could stop this invasion last week, and they can stop those who invaded the country last week as well, because all you have to do is in fact enforce the laws of the country that they're hiring these illegal. They don't want to call them illegal aliens. They want to call them Biden apologized for having used the word illegal in describing a man that's in the country illegally that killed somebody. And apologize, and they asked him, do you really want to use that word illegal to describe the man that killed somebody in the United States? And Biden was apologizing, had been calling him illegal. Came back later on after he didn't apologize to the members of the Supreme Court. I want to, if he was not the president of the United States, I would say out public, I would like to give him a smack.
Oh, visit the family of the victim? No,
not at all. No. And look, didn't even have enough respect for the family to get the name right. Saying Lincoln, the woman's name was Laken, Laken. He's gonna say Lincoln.
Well, with that idiot though, Biden, that's but close enough for jazz. You know, I mean, I'm serious, because I mean, let's face it, he barely knows his own name. I mean,
yeah, this man does. Ingram does not belong in the judgeship in New York. And Biden, I know you think you elected Biden. You didn't elect Biden. Biden was installed in that office. And he doesn't belong in the presidency. You didn't put him there. And he wasn't placed there by the voters of the American people. You can claim that to those others that were not watching what went on here. I was watching what went on here. Now, let me get back here, backtrack a little bit here. I wanted to say that Clarence Thomas was not there, and I know he won't come if Biden is still in that seat next year, not after what he did what he did last week, because there's nowhere in the world you would want to go in the aftermath of that and sit there and let this man lecture you, because the one that's holding the feet to the fire more than anyone else on the court is Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas is the most strict constructionist on the Supreme Court. When people say they're strict, that they are constitutionalists, I don't take their word for it. Not if you, in fact, not reciting it correctly. Many of them can't recite it because they don't know it.
I'd hire you to be train them in the Constitution.
They need some more training here because I don't think they're trained in. I actually kept thinking to myself as I was listening to them over the years. I was trying to figure out what the training was like, because you can't say the things they were saying based upon the training. So I was trying to think, well, what did they miss? What did they miss at all of these highfalutin universities cost more money? The reason why my university is dismissed, it doesn't cost as all I can see is that it doesn't cost as much to get a degree there, and it was even less back in that time period, than it is to get these degrees at these Ivy League schools. All it is that you're paying more money. You're not paying for more education.
Well, there's one woman I know. She went to U of D in Detroit, University of Detroit, and she would become a lawyer. She passed the bar exam on the first attempt for both the state of Illinois and the state of Michigan. The graduates of the University of Michigan Law School would require 2 or 3 attempts to pass the bar exam here in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, right there it goes bang for buck. You got people who are more aggressive, who actually were hungry, who went out, become lawyers, and maybe didn't get it from the most reputable and most prestigious. And now they're out there. They fought dirty, got dirty, rolled around the mud, and they know what they're doing. And that's who's teaching these classes, these schools that don't demand the highest price.
Yeah, Claudine Gay is a good example of that. How did she get to be head of supposedly the top university in the country, and she plagiarized her way all the way from her grad work to the place that she's now the president of Harvard University? And when they caught her at plagiarizing some of the work, for example, the work of the woman that was the Vanderbilt University scholar, Carol Swain, Dr. Carol Swain, plagiarized her work. People are calling her up and saying, look, this is, we're reading this manuscript that this woman wrote, and we're seeing you in here, and they're quoting you sung in verse for paragraphs and more paragraphs, even pages, and you're not getting any credit for it. We're looking for the footnotes, it's not there. Now, in the back of the book, they gave her they did say they used, her name is there. But in the footnotes, where you're supposed to footnote any plagiarism, when you're quoting in a text verbatim, you got to put that in your footnote.
There's no reason to get called plagiarism. All you do is just do a intro to where you got your information. So just the double space down, do a single space, the entire thing in a single space thing, so it separates it from your text, which should be double text. I used to write 3 research papers every week. 8 or 10 pages. So, you're just extrapolating that. You have to do citations, and that's all you do. You can direct quote from the first, but the whole page, and you can just say, and they just Xerox it or whatever now and take out the space there and insert it. You can do that in a WordPress. You don't have any need to actually plagiarize. That's all you're doing anyway. With you to creatively plagiarize when you're doing research. That's
John, you have to do that because the theft is one thing to steal persons' property. That shouldn't happen either. But in the university, the theft of the mind, that's why they throw you out of the university when they find that you have fudged your scholarship. You can't have a more egregious crime at the university. We're not talking about the stuff that you do physically against people, which they're doing a lot of that now. People just going off. But the biggest crime in the university is a theft of the mind. Somebody else's idea has been stolen, and the person whose idea it is not given credit for the idea. Look, I'm almost in tears. That is a very bad. You can't get any worse than that at the university level. Now, it's bad enough in high school. But at the university level, it's unforgivable. You just can't do it. And it looks at that there's another person that just now caught at Harvard University also that did the same thing in terms of fudging the scholarship. And that person is now being called for. Let's see what happens in that case. But Claudine Gay had to go. They tried not to oust her. And she's still getting paid, by the way, behind the scenes. They still owe that $1 million. But it should have been something in the contract that if that happens, then you forego your salary. You can have that. But a lot of this is a lot of this. I mean, this to me is a violation that is unforgivable, because you are therefore credentialed to go in front of people as a scholar, and you have to be very, very clear about what it is that you are representing. And if you stole your way to that place, and it's not backed up by your scholarship, only by the paper that you're carrying around with you, then that is a national problem for the country. They have scholars who don't have the scholarship their degrees entail. Let me go back here. I got to go back up a little bit. I wanted to make sure that I brought this book by William Rehnquist, Grand Inquest, the historic impeachment of Justice Samuel Chase and President Andrew Johnson. Those two cases right there should be required in the graduate school. But there's another thing there's another book that ought to be read in graduate school as well, and this is a book by Leon Friedman. Leon Friedman edited the book called Brown v. Board, subtitle, The Landmark Oral Argument Before the Supreme Court. It came out during the 50th anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education case, and I picked it up. I had not read the transcript of the Brown case. Of course, I read the ruling. See, that's another mistake that we make. People have read the rulings made by the court, but really, if you're going to be grounded in the ruling of the court, and that's your expertise to do that, you need to read the expertise that the court made its ruling on. And I had not done that. On the 5th anniversary, I did that because they're now celebrating 50 years of Brown. Did that in 2004. And I finally had a chance to read the transcript in this book by Leon Friedman. It's the Brown v. Board, the landmark oral argument before the Supreme Court. I'll tell you, when I read this book, what jumped off the page for me was that every word in that argument made by, there were five court cases in the Brown court cases, by the way, five different ones, but Brown was the first one in the alphabet, so it's named after Brown, Linda Brown in Kansas City. But there were 4 other cases also filed under which that umbrella of that court. Now, the point I'm making here is that in reading the transcript of that court, it was shocking to me that Thurgood Marshall, this figure that everyone was saying that Clarence Thomas should not be following him because of the grandeur of Thurgood Marshall in these civil rights cases. Thurgood Marshall could not stand in the same room with the scholarship of Clarence Thomas. And in that court case, it shows in that transcript, which is what really surprised me, was that Felix Frankfurter, the liberal on that court, took Thurgood Marshall pretty much by the hand. Every time he started veering over this way, Frankfurter would bring him back to the argument. He'd veer over that way, he'd bring him back to the argument again, to guide him toward the arguments the court needed to make, because the court had already made up its mind there's going to be a unanimous verdict on striking down Plessy versus Ferguson. The transcript is clear about that. I'm right about it. I'm the only one saying that. I'm right about that. That's what happened. And the transcript shows it. I'm telling you this. Until you understand, and William Rehnquist, I have to give a lot of credit to you. I don't think another person that's been the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, I don't recall them writing a book, as Rehnquist did, on a very important topic, particularly now on impeachment, and that's the impeachment. 15 judges, federal judges, have been impeached in this country. 6 of them have been removed from office. One of them, by the way, was Alcee Hastings, that was later on was representative from Florida. I got to wrap this up. Andrew Johnson, up until the 1990s, was the only president that had been impeached and failed by 1 vote to be removed as they went around and so on and so forth. I don't know what would have happened if they had removed him, because the impeachment was, in fact, unconstitutional. Because you cannot reach, that's what I'm saying to Biden, you can't reach into the president's domain and tell the president he's wrong for the way he carries out the executive branch of government, which he is singularly the only one to make that determination within the rule of law. And there's a hedge around the president. You members of the Supreme Court get ready to move upon the immunity question of the president. I'm going to see what you do with that, because there's a hedge around the president of the United States. It's not an immunity around the president. It's a hedge around the president. In order to remove that hedge and carry forward anything against the president, you must first of all remove the hedge. And the hedge is to be removed can only happen through the impeachment process. If you don't remove that, and the president does not go through that process and they're convicted because of it, the framers in their infinite wisdom in writing this document then forbid them to come behind it and then persecute the president out of office. Can't do it. I'm saying it. There's no scholar in this country qualified to say anything different. Okay, read the book, Grand Inquest by William H. Rehnquist. You'll get a lot out of it, particularly out of the chapter that he does, starting with chapter 9 on the impeachment of Andrew Johnson. You guys that did that, I want to wake you up in your grave and tell you to your face, can't do it. Okay. Yeah, okay. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.